Okay guys, today we're going to be talking about the Luger and mainly the differences between the commercial model we have here and the military model. This one right here was made in 1920 and it was for the German commercial market, and this one up here was made in 1918 and it was made for the German military. So to begin with, let's go over a little general history of the Luger. In 1893, Hugo Borchardt created the first commercially successful semi-automatic pistol in the C93 Borchardt. It used a toggle link system just like the Luger does. It had a little unusual ergonomics. There was a grip like the Luger, but the mainspring, instead of how we now know it to be being in the grip, he had stuck it out in a big knot almost on the back. It was put through a couple military trials. Switzerland, I think Germany also might have done it, but Switzerland definitely did. And it was determined that they liked the idea of it and it functioned correctly, but because of the ergonomics having the big, bulge on the back, and then it had almost a straight grip frame, they decided that they weren't going to go for it yet. So then in the later 1890s, Georg Luger, who had created the C93 Borchardt's round, he was brought on to go ahead and fix some of the issues that the C93 Borchardt had. And I don't have an example of one of those first 1898 models, but it's close enough to one of these that if you had seen it, you would automatically associate it with a Luger. It would have had a grip safety and it would have been in a different caliber, and then there are minor differences throughout, but he pretty much got it correct on the first try. So the first adopter of the Luger was then Switzerland, and I believe they did in 1900, and it was one of those that had the grip safety and it was in a different caliber. It would have been in 30 Luger. There were a couple different differences. I think it may have had just a slightly longer barrel, but overall it was the same design. Later on, when the pistol went to German trials, which at the time was a much bigger deal, it was a very bigger military, bigger order they were going to be having, Germany looked it over and decided on a couple different changes they wanted to do, with the deletion of the grip safety being one of the big ones, and then they also wanted the round to be a bit larger than 30 caliber. So what they ended up doing was, the original round 7.62 Luger, well 7.65 Luger or 30 Luger, started out 9mm in the rear, and then it necked down to 30 caliber. So what Georg Luger did was he just unbottlenecked it and made it straight wall. So then it was 9mm all the way through. So the bolt head is actually the same between the 30 Luger models and the 9mm models. But the barrel had to be changed, and the recoil spring of course had to be changed, but it was an easy fix. So then in 1908 the German military ended up adopting the Luger as their main sidearm, and because it was in 1908 it was designated the P for pistol 08, P08. This would be called a P08. This one technically, because it is not military marked, it would be wrong to call it a P08, even though now we do pretty much refer to them all as P08s. Now, a lot of people think that mainly it was just selling guns to the German military, and there were a lot of them, but there were many other countries that had either had a contract for just the main pistol, and then there were some that had just a couple hundred or a couple thousand here and there. The US at one point tested out a 45 ACP version of the Luger. So there's a lot of different variations out there. And then of course there was the whole commercial side that DWM wanted to focus on too. And the main ones were just sold in Germany. So that's what this one right here is. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the bigger differences between the two. There's not really that many. It's completely 100% interchangeable, but it's mostly markings, and then there's a little couple minor tweaks that say would have been better in a military setting, but not so much in a commercial setting. Okay, so starting with the commercial one here, as you'll note, It's a very nice blued color, and then as you can see, maybe it's showing up there, the trigger, the takedown lever, originally the safety would have been, and I think on some the magazine button was also, there you go, a nice yellow straw blue color. This was also shared on most of the military ones, but some of them, you know, just for time and effort, they switched to just a normal bluing. But let's start up here at the barrel and note off some of the differences. The first one you're going to see is, if I can zoom in there and get it. Right there is the serial number. On this one it's 4493. There's that, and then there's a little inspection mark right there, and that's it that they've got right there. We look over to the side, and if we can get that, if it'll focus, there we go. That right there is a proof mark, but it's specifically the commercial proof mark. So as you can see, there's only one there, and there's no other serial numbers as we can see so far. This isn't serialized, that isn't, trigger isn't, the frame other than here isn't. If we look up here on the top, you can see there's no insignia, no year of manufacture on the top right here. That's another very easy tell to tell that it's a commercial instead of a military. See, if we look right here, there is the last two numbers of the serial number, so that means the toggle and the frame are matched. But other than that, it's pretty bare just about everywhere. This over here where it says Germany, that would have been whenever it was imported. Originally, I don't believe it would have said Germany right there. That's for import laws in other places. And then this one, unusually enough, has had the shoulder stock mount ground off. I haven't been able to find anything about that. Whenever it was decided that the military ones would have shoulder stocks with them, they actually stopped production of the 9mm versions without shoulder stocks on them, because it was just easier for them to go ahead and make them all with it and then issue it to the ones that it was supposed to be on. So seeing one without it is just a little strange. So if it doesn't show up on one that you may see, it doesn't mean anything in particular. It just means maybe at some point it was imported to a place that didn't allow shoulder stocks. These shorter barreled ones are still NFA items if you put a shoulder brace on them, so that could be a good reason for it, but somewhere along the line it's just had it cut off. Another big difference in the commercials is, for the most part, there's exceptions to it, but the magazine here has a wood base plate. It's not serialized, but then everything else is pretty much standard. But the wood base plate usually means it's from a commercial gun. Okay, after seeing that, let's go ahead and move on to the outside of the military gun, and we'll note some of the differences there. Okay, so right here is the P08. So we're going to take a closer look at it and mark some of the differences between it and the commercial one, and we'll see what we can find. First of all, obviously it's a little less well put together, I guess you could say, than the commercial. It's not this fine blue color, the straw bluing. It's kind of mainly worn off. It would have really originally been a little more golden than this, but it wasn't really made, you know, with looks in mind, especially this late in the war. So let's go ahead and zoom in here on the serial number. And right there you can see it's 5606, but then, if that will focus, that right there is a military acceptance mark, and we'll go ahead and show it doesn't appear on the commercial one, only on the military, but then those two markings at the top are pretty much the same. Over to the side, you can see serial numbers are on this one a lot more. Germans in World War I and into World War II were very particular about their serial numbering. You can find some that have screws, individual screws have serial numbers. And it affects value a lot these days trying to get one if it's all matching. This one happens to be all matching except for the magazine. That's pretty much what you're going to find. And if it has the original magazine and the spare, it'll be worth 10 times the amount. But you can see serial number there, last two there, last two there. We pull that back a little, last two on that. We got last two there, but that's also on the commercial. Last two there. Now, this right here is an interesting story where it's got the year it was produced. So it's got 1918 and 1920. And you'll only find this on World War I ones, and not all of them. Only some of them will. What happened was, after World War I, when Germany lost and the Treaty of Versailles came into effect, Germany was only allowed to have so many military handguns in the country. I don't remember the exact amount, but it's a very low amount for a country that big. And so what they had to do was take up all the military guns they had and somehow be able to differentiate between the ones they were going to keep and the ones they were planning on getting rid of. So what happened was, on this one, that 1918 had been there since it was created. But this 1920 right here, that's when they took inventory of all of them. That not only serves as saying that it had been through World War I and it was getting retooled, that also shows that it is one of them that they are planning to keep into the military. So this one would have made it through World War I, and then it was probably taken back to an armory and it was kept in the country. I'm not sure when this one would have actually made it over here. There are no import markings or anything like that. It's possible it could have been sometime during World War II, but there really isn't a way to tell with that. Another thing to notice on the outside while we're here, generally, not always, but generally, the military guns will have darker wood. It's just, they like the specific kind, and then this, of course, looks more ornamental on a commercial one. That's not always the case, but it does pop up. And then the last thing we can look at here is the magazine. Earlier on in the war, the military ones would have had a wood base plate, and it would have been more this color. Later on, though, as things were getting pretty tough, they switched over to one of these, and it's just, I'm not sure if it's tin or what, maybe zinc. It's definitely not steel, whatever it is. They switched to that being the base plate. So now that we've looked at all just the differences in how they look, let's go ahead and go over some of the actual mechanics that are different between the two. Okay, so now we've got both of these just normally field stripped, so let's go over some of the parts into it, and then we'll see how, there's only a couple real differences, but we'll see those things when we come over them. So this right here, let's start off, well actually we'll start at the frame here. As you can see, the frame, the whole bottom is just one big piece. This right here is the takedown lever, trigger's right here, and the trigger actually is just barely held in by that pin, so we can just press it from the other side and it pops right out. It's a very simple trigger. So we put that to the side, and it's also serial numbered on the military one there. We can even go a step further, and once this is in the down position, the takedown pin also comes out, and it is serialized. Inside, down there is the mainspring and where it clicks into the toggle. This right here is the bolt hold open. So on the last round that pops up, and you can see it's very unusually blued there. It's like that on a commercial too, so it must have been for some certain reason. But right here's the safety. Down in this one is the safe, unlike most modern ones. And then right there is the German word for safe or secure. And then this little piece pops up here. And on the military one, it is serialized. So let's move on. We got the trigger. See, right here we've got the toggle itself. Firing pin, bolt head. And then to take this apart, I find it's actually easy to take this piece. It's got a little piece sticking out there, and you can press it let's get it started there. Press it in there, and then that pin will just fall right out. So it's not going to hurt it or anything because it's barely held in there. Pin comes out, these two can separate. So now you're left with the toggle itself where it connects to the mainspring in there. And then here's the bolt head. And to take it one step further, if you press down and rotate on this, we can get it. There we go. It's just held in there by a slot. That right there is the firing pin spring and plunger. And then we can get that out. Right there is the firing pin. So on this military one, this is an actual difference. These grooves cut in. It was found out early on that if mud or dust or anything like that was able to get in from the front here, it would stop up the firing pin and it wouldn't be able to come through. So the solution was cutting these little divots here, so any kind of obstruction could get filtered out the back and it would get stuck eventually in the back. So then you'd be a lot more reliable with your strikes. So let's take that out. On the commercial ones, it's just completely smooth that, and we'll get to that. Let's see. Right here, of course, is the, you could kind of call it a slide barrel, I guess, barrel assembly. It just comes out as one piece except for right here. It's kind of a transfer bar into a sear. We'll go over that in a second, how you get from pulling the trigger to it actually going off. But for right now, let's switch over to the commercial and we'll show the differences there too. Okay, so overall it's really the same thing, so I'm just going to save time here and just show off the firing pins. This one is the military, and this one right here is the commercial, and as you can see, those grooves right there are the only difference. Originally they were all like this, but after the German trials they switched just the military ones to this style. So these were made in tandem until whenever they stopped making the commercial ones, and it was just this. So let's go ahead and show how to start reassembling them, and then we'll do just one final little bit of differences, and then we'll be done. I was putting these back together, and I'm going to go ahead and point out just this one more difference. This pin right here holds in the toggle to the barrel assembly, and on the military one it is of course got two little digits of the serial number on it, and all that does is just fit that into there. Okay, so to reassemble the Luger here, for its time especially, it's a very simple reassembly process, and the disassembly is just the same thing but in reverse. So what we do is we take the frame here, and then, well actually no, we'll start here with the barrel and the toggle. There's little rails that it fits in. It's hard to miss. Well, now I miss it. There we go. You get it to about there, and then you lift up the toggle and push it on over, and then right there the bolt gets caught on the sear, so you have to push the sear down, move it into place, let the sear go, and then drop that all into place. And if you do that correctly, this hole should line up perfectly here. You take the toggle pin, which on this commercial one, it's a very nice blue color, and it should be able to just sit right in there. It sits flush, and it's only be able to go in one way. Now this thing is what connects down here in the grip to the mainspring. It's what gives all the tension to the toggle. So that needs to be up, and it helps a lot if you hold them upside down. There's just rails on either one, so you simply put them together, keep holding it backwards so that thing doesn't fall, and then as you can see right there, that's where you want it to fall into. Okay, right in front of these, and it gets caught on those. Those are arms that catch onto these two tabs. It goes right into there. You can get it all the way to the back, but it still is loose. Once you get it to here, you have to pull back just that much. That right there is all you need to do. And then this little tab will go right into there. So pull back, put into place, let go, and just, well, if it gets in there right, flip the tab right up, and you're good. Let's go over quickly just how the trigger goes to dropping the firing pin and making the round go off. So I'll need to take this apart just a little bit to show you. And we'll do that. Okay, so the trigger is very simple. That right there is all it does. There's nothing on the inside, that's it. I'll zoom in on that. So this little bar interfaces with this bar. So when you pull down on this, what it's doing is going like that. And as you can see, that's a little L shape right there, and it pushes that piece forward. What does that piece do? That piece sits beside this piece right here. And when you press on that, let me make sure. Okay. We're not cocked, so on these you kind of have to worry about firing pins breaking if it's not got one in the chamber. That bar presses down on here, and as you can see that moving right there, what that is doing on the inside, let's take it apart one more time. So when that is being pressed down, let's get it to focus. On the inside, we can see, well, we might be able to see, here we go. That right there is moving ever so slightly. I don't even know if you can see it, but it is moving backwards. And when that moves backwards, this on the inside would be pulled back, and it lets it go, basically. It goes, if we can get it to focus. There we go. That little pin would be backwards. That's a firing pin. And you pull it, let's go. Firing pin fires. That's all it is. It's just a trigger and then a transfer bar into another transfer bar into the sear. It makes for not really a good trigger pull, but I mean, this was back in 1898 it would have been. So for that time period, there really wasn't anything that you could compare it to. So that's how that works. Now let's go over just a couple more little differences and then we'll be done. Okay, so the last difference is whenever you put on the safety, we'll zoom in here, it's the same for both of these on this part. When you turn on the safety, this little piece flips up. Okay, and what that does is, if you remember, this piece right here moves out whenever you pull the trigger. You can see it moving. It blocks that from happening. You can tug on this all day and the sear just can't get out of the way enough to drop the firing pin. For whatever reason, it must have been somewhere in the military contract. On the military one, when you flip the safety on, you are still able to chamber around. It doesn't impede on your ability to do that. Let's see if I can do it left-handed here to show you. Okay. On the civilian version, whenever you go to cock it with the safety on, it can't. It cannot go past that right there. I don't know if it was the military asking to be able to do that, or if it was them being afraid civilians were going to have it on safe and then somehow chamber around. I don't know why it was decided for that, but as you can see, if I stack these up right here, the sear, I guess you could call it, transfer bar sear, it is actually a different piece. This one has this material all the way back to meet the safety there. This one has a cutout, so you have enough room to chamber around. So that, I think, covers all of the differences between these two in particular. This is a pretty standard example of what you're going to find commercial. This is the pattern that was used in World War I and World War II. That's a P08. They're all pretty much going to be the same, if they're German at least. Okay, I hope you guys learned something from this video, but don't take this one alone as being the be-all end-all of Lugers. There's so many different kinds, and there's so many different exceptions to every single rule with them. This is kind of more just a crash course in what the little differences are between the military and the commercial ones. If you find yourself with one, do as much research as you can on them, because they range everywhere in how much they would cost and you know, what kind of deal you'd be getting on one. But that's all I've got for you today. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.